Hello and welcome back to the channel. Now, I wasn't going to do any more videos this weekend. My plan for Sunday night was just to park my arse on the couch and watch Santa Clarita Diet Season 2, which I hope we're all watching on Netflix, but Wizard has gone and released a new version of MFME, his fruit machine emulator, so I figured, well, you know, it would be very rude not to do an update on the channel for that. We've got, there's the, you know, I didn't think this through here. Maybe I should just be using Bandicam for this. There we are. So there is the release thread over at Desert Island Fruits, which Wizard started yesterday evening. Now, this is not a major release. This is what is known as a point release. In software development, what you kind of have are full releases and full version upgrades and point releases. So he went from version 5, which was released in November 2016. We then got 5.1, which of course was a point release. Then got 6, which was a full new upgrade. And now we've got 6.1. So this is a point release. And that means what you're going to get in here are incremental improvements, quality of life updates, bug fixes, all that kind of thing, but Wizard has decided that there's not enough new stuff in here to justify going to a whole new version number and calling this version 7. And I agree with him looking at the change list for this slot. Now, I'll be the first to admit that if you're not an fruit machine emulation mega nerd, as I am, you will probably not find too much to be excited in that list there. But this is all the stuff that has been changed and tweaked and fixed in version 6.1. There's one very particular thing there, which I'm going to draw attention to. Fixed Windows 10 maximize border issue due to Windows 10 invisible window frames. That was something that I flagged up specifically to Wizard. And he said, oh yeah, okay, that's not working as I would expect it to. I will fix that in the next version. And he has. That's a wonderful thing with being able to have a direct dialogue with the developer of what's most likely, I would say, this is my favourite piece of software in the world. And we're able to talk directly with Wizard through the various Fruit Machine emulation forums. And there are other things going on in here as well. That one there, added flip reel for Mazuma Stir Crazy, even Wet and Wild, Jiggery, Pokery, etc. Now, what that's referring to, Mazuma released a number of slots in the, I'm saying £15 jackpot days, where they use like a card fan reel for the high-low reel. And I think they did a poker game with it as well. I think that's that Jiggery Pokery, which had 5 or 6 of them. And basically, it was a fancy version of a normal reel, or in the case of their normal AWPs like Stir Crazy and Wet and Wild, it was like their version of a high-low reel. And it did look very nice, because it was like a proper flipping card reel within the cabinet. The problem with them was that they always broke. After a certain amount of time, the things always broke, and if you came to one of the machines that had been on site for any amount of time in the wild, they inevitably didn't work properly. They would either show you the wrong number, or they'd lock up and alarm the machine, or they just wouldn't work at all. They were a nightmare of a thing. But he has, of course, the emulated version will never break. And the key thing there, of course, is what that will allow is that these machines can now be emulated. So even though the technology upon which they are based, which I'm guessing is Scorpion 4, even though Scorpion 4 has been emulated for a long time, that specific little bit of hardware that was using those machines will now open up those machines for emulation. There's also a few other things going on. Let's just bring this up, which is... There we are. So he's added a particular sort of hopper to this, just for this one machine. Crystal Club Twister Classic, which apparently you can see down here used a serial mech hopper for MPU4. These are real, they're small changes in a lot of ways, but going forward, they're adding new things to the emulator. They're allowing different things to be run. So even though this does look like, I very much appreciate that a lot of people are going to look down this list and say, they're going to say, I have no idea what any of that means, or I'm not interested. But what you've got to think about is that this is the kind of thing that Wizard has been iterating over the years, and for many, many years now. I mean, I first got involved in 2001, and he'd been working on this emulator now for some period of time, even back then. I guess we're probably not a million miles off the 20-year mark for when he did the very sort of first prototype version of MPU3.4. And over the tens upon tens of versions that he's authored over those years, every single one of them is going to have a list like this of stuff that's being fixed and improved and added. So do remember that at one point, MPU3.4, as this emulator used to be known, only emulated those two technologies, just Barcrest, MPU3 and MPU4. And now we've got an emulator. He did change the name to Multiple Fruit Machine Emulator, which now emulates multiple technologies, all kinds of esoteric and exotic variations of their technologies, implementations that were used on foreign markets, and so on and so forth. So even though that list might look a little bit dull, it does nonetheless represent another step forward. And if you add enough of these small incremental steps forward together, you get major, major changes in what is possible. I mean, just pulling out off the top of my head, say screenplay, the M1AB technology or video technology, AWP screenplay, which I've put into my Hall of Fame. Back when Fruit Machine emulation first kicked off, I don't think any of us yes, we dreamed, but we didn't expect that would actually be emulated. The idea that MPU3.4 in the condition that it was then, as great as it was, but that would evolve into something where we could play video-based AWPs on an entirely different technology. So these are important. These releases of MFME are important, and they push things forward. Now, what I'm going to do specifically here is just relate the changes that were made at that Windows 10 invisible border thing. Now, running on the left-hand side here is MFME V6. And running on the right-hand side here is MFME V6.1. And to the untrained eye, you might not think, well, they look largely the same to me. But can you see this thing down here? There was a problem with the Maximize option on MFME V6. And the issue was that in Windows 10, you've got they have these tiny little borders around Windows, which didn't exist in Windows 7 and earlier versions. Now, when I was running MFME V5 and 5.1 on Windows 7, you could drag the window of the emulator so that it would go as large as it could down to your taskbar. And then when I got a new PC last year and I went to Windows 10, that didn't work. And what happened was, because on Windows 7, that's what 5 and 5.1 and 6 looked like. You could drag them out to the full size, right down to your taskbar and right up to the top of your monitor there. That didn't happen in Windows 10. Just to check that I was getting things correct, I then fired up the emulator on Mrs. Degsy and Degsy Jr.'s PCs, because they both got Windows 10 PCs, and I had exactly the same behaviour there. And just to check that I wasn't going mad, I then fired up my Windows 7 PC, which is still on the network, so it's still accessible, fired the emulator back up, and was able to do that. So I then did report in the MFME 5.1 bugs thread and said, hey, I think there's a slight issue here with resizing and trying to maximise out in windowed mode in the emulator. Once I was sure of what I was saying, because how can I put this? Wizard he's polite, but he can be brief. If you report something or say that something is wrong that has been explained before, or it's your own fault, or it was covered in the changelog, you will get a polite but brief response, shall we say. But I've satisfied myself that there was a change in the behaviour between the emulator on Windows 7 and to Windows 10, and Wizard said, oh yeah, okay, I can fix that. It's to do with the different border sizes on Windows 10 versus earlier versions of Windows, which the emulator doesn't account for. I will fix that in the next version, and now you can do that. So that's going to be handy for me as well for when I do my Fruit Machine emulation videos and I have two slots side by side in windowed mode. That's going to be really handy, and because I'm very pernickety and particular about things, that just really messed with my head. The fact that I couldn't drag the window out to full size, and now you can in MFME V6.1. Again, I realise I'm talking about stuff here that an awful lot of people are just going to say, I'm not even remotely bloody interested in that, which is fine. These videos, certainly the videos about these point upgrades to MFME, they are for the hardcore Fruit Machine emulation nerd audience, which I will gladly count myself to be amongst. So there you go. Just a quick update here, but just to let you know that there is a new version of the emulator available. There's a few fixes and tweaks in there, and with that flip reel, we're actually going to have a few machines available to us now that were never emulatable before. There's a fair few other bits and pieces in there, but fundamentally it's not a massive upgrade. That's why he's done it as a point upgrade, but it is a new release and it's worth getting hold of, I would say. That's it for this update, and I will see you next time.